Hi, I'm SHAUNN CASSELLE, and I'm here today with artist Dennis Winston. And usually we're part of the WALTONGALLEry Gallery Talk. However, we're taking it on the road today, and we're in Mr. Winston's studio. I'm so grateful to be here, Dennis.
Well, thank you,
So
Shaun.
is this where everything happens?
This is where everything happens. This is where I come every day and try to come up with some creative ways to cut into wood and do my art. And I just come here every day and just work.
So like how many hours do you spend in your studio?
I usually come in here about mid-morning, and sometimes I stay as late as 5 or 6. It just depends on what I'm working on, whether I have an exhibition deadline or just how intensely involved I am with whatever I'm doing. You know?
Well, I notice I see you everywhere. You're everywhere. And you're very supportive of other artists. That is notable. I want to commend you for that, because that's fantastic. You're always there to support other artists at their openings, and you're at Artist Talk a lot. Is that part of your inspiration?
Well, as you know, Shaun, I'm an educator, so therefore that's part of my mantle that I wear. I'm involved in lots of arts organizations. I'm working with the Viz Arts, and I used to be with the hand workshop. I'm part of the one-off group. I try to support a lot of artists, and I was also involved with Pine Camp for a number of years. And sometimes my students have exhibitions, sometimes my friends have exhibitions, and so therefore I try to get out and see what everyone is doing, and you learn a lot from that by looking at other artists. And it's good to be around people who are creative and gain some insights into your work, as well as looking at what they're attempting to do.
Speaking of galleries and museums, where are some of the places your work has been featured over the years?
Over the years, I've been in a number of galleries, actually all over the country. I've been in some major shows in Chicago and New York, and I do a lot of work with the National Alliance of Artists for HBCUs. We do a number of exhibitions each year. The National Civil Rights Museum, the Visual Arts Center. I do some juried shows. I've been at the Waltongallery. I've been at galleries in Lynchburg College, Norfolk State, Hampton University, University of Indiana.
So you name it, you pretty much have been there. I want to read a quote real quick that I saw that they had on you. It says, "The woodcut allows me to use direct, bold, black and white imagery to create works that reflect both my social and aesthetic needs." What does that mean exactly in layman terms?
For me, it means that the work that I do is a part of who I am, the experiences that I've had, the people that I've seen. My work reflects on the fact that I've been an educator, so some of my work is of young people in various activities. I grew up in a rural environment here in Virginia. I was born in Hanover County, so I spent some time on a farm with my grandparents and so forth, and so therefore I do rural images of life in Virginia. I do historical pieces and also do pieces that reflect the values that I have. For instance, recently I've been working on some things that reflect on the idea of voter education and voter rights, which I think is very important to think in terms of how art can be used to somewhat stimulate people into action to do certain things. So I want my work to reflect on different things that I feel very strongly about. So it doesn't matter what area it's in, as far as it doesn't matter about the subject. For instance, it could be about youth education, it could be about voting, it could be about something that's happening in the news.
Do you enjoy giving titles to your work?
Oh, most of the work has a title that tries to send a message. Actually, one of my students, when I was teaching, I used to do things that pretty much basically said what I did. If it was a horse, I said a horse. And a young lady who is an artist now, who probably remember her telling me that, "Hey, Mr. Winston, you need to do these prints, but you need to come up with better titles." And so therefore she taught me, and even as a middle school student, it made me a little more reflective of my titles. And I want the titles to match the work and kind of give you an indication as the viewer what voyage or why I'm inviting you into this image, so that it would make more sense as to what it is and what I'm trying to say.
You know, I want to bring this up. I was recently at an auction, and your work was in the auction. and the auctioneer said that it is a form, woodcut, that people aren't using as much anymore. They're not working in that particular medium. Do you have any explanations for that?
Well, it's a pretty old process. It goes back to, 4th century, China, Japan. It's one of the oldest printmaking methods, and it's pretty much being done the same way it was done in that early history. The Chinese invented this process, the Japanese took it and elevated it to a whole nother level and started adding color and all the different sizes of woods and all of that. So I'm doing something that's pretty ancient, actually. It's a simple process. It doesn't require a lot of materials and special a press or something like that to actually make the prints. It's a pretty direct process where I, as the artist, can come up with my idea. I can execute that idea on a block of wood. My tools are actually little knives, and I use these like you would use a pencil or an ink pen or a marker. I actually cut into the surface of the wood to create my textures and designs. Once I do that, I take a brayer and very black ink, and I roll it out on a brayer and roll it on the surface of this plate or block that I've created, and actually create the print. So this is the same way it's been done for a long period of time. So I'm doing something that's pretty much intact as far back as 4th, 8th century, 15th century.
How many layers do you have to do, or how many times do you have to do this?
Well, for me, I believe I cut very small areas, and I try to keep the idea of the drawing and the mark of the tools is essential in my work. So therefore, I put down multiple thin layers of ink, whereas some artists will use a much heavier covering of ink. But I want my ink to have several light layers because I want to retain the little nooks and crannies, the little sensitive lines that I created. And for me, that's very important. I want very small, minute lines, and then I want very bold lines. I want them to help to give the whole idea of this print a variety of cuts and textures in order for it to be very exciting to look at, hopefully to the viewer.
You mentioned earlier that you used to be a freelance photographer. I know you teach calligraphy as well, the woodcut, other things, other mediums you use. How did you decide woodcut was going to be your main focus?
Well, actually, as an artist, I started out as a photographer. I did some illustration of books when I was a student. I did photo essays for Rita Housing as a student. So that's when I really got into black and white photography and telling stories through the use of photography, photo essays. So that sort of led me into this whole idea of looking at black and white imagery. When I was a student, I was very much interested in etching, because etching is a very dynamic way of making prints where you can actually take a great advantage of the print process, but also you can get these really nice line drawings and so forth. Well, of course, with the woodcut, it's not line, more so shapes and patterns and textures that you're creating. Over a period of time, I just decided that the photography has probably lent itself to me being able to do this and sort of help lend me towards looking at how the black and white imagery works. But I've been into a little bit of, I've done sculpture, I've done ceramics, silk screen, calligraphy. I taught a lot of calligraphy. So I've always experimented a lot with a lot of different media, but in about 1980, 85, I started doing these woodcuts, and they started getting a little bit of recognition. I did a couple of national shows. And I actually was very proud that I was actually in shows with people like Jacob Lawrence, Elizabeth Catlett. So
that's awesome.
I was like in awe of that whole situation. I remember the first major show I did was in Chicago. A national jury show, and my work was selected. So I guess over a period of time now, people see me as a woodcut artist, and sometimes when I want to do other things, they still see me as a woodcut artist, which is okay.
So I really want to say that I really enjoy your work. You are prolific as we can see. I mean, I'm constantly seeing you working on things just over and over and over, and I just love how it's like abstract or figurative or landscape. I'm just a very strong admirer of your work.
But thank you. Whatever I do has a certain amount of quality to it, and that it's well thought out and has a great deal of craftsmanship, because I strongly believe in craftsmanship and making sure that the work has a certain quality about it that will make it stand out. And that's what I hope to do.
Excuse me. Who are some of your influences?
Well, I studied with A.B. Jackson. A.B. Jackson had a great influence on me, and of course, as a young artist in the '60s, David Driscoll came out with a book, and there were a number of times that I had a chance to read about and hear about artists like Elizabeth Catlett and Jacob Lawrence and Richard Mayhew. It's tough being an artist anyway, but being African American artists at the time in which they worked and excelled was extremely difficult. So I'm amazed about how they were so successful, what they did. So I look to these artists and I read about their comments, and I've talked to some of them, and they've been very inspirational to me. And especially the last artist I spent a great deal of some time with was John Biggers. And so John Biggers would speak about his art, and I was able to glean a lot from his thoughts and so forth about what I'm to do in my work and how I should approach my work. So it's a process of learning from all of these giants and reading their histories and understanding what they went through, and then trying to carry on that legacy and also to pass it on through students and other people.
Well, it's been such a pleasure having the opportunity to meet with you today in your studio, and also to catch a little bit of you in process.
Thank you.
So I just want to say this has once again been Gallery Talk with SHAUNN CASSELLE with the phenomenal artist Dennis Winston, and I look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you. You're so kind.